Weirdo Gang, I'm back with another reaction. Now y'all know this center shit been going all over the world. So they say this the true story behind the movie. We finna see what's poppin'.
Nightmare Files.
Before the horror movie Sinners took audiences into a world of temptation, music, and shadows, there was Robert Johnson. In the movie Sinners, there's a character named Sammy. You know where this story is going if you've seen the movie. But Robert, he didn't come from a script. He wasn't dreamed up in a writer's room. He was real. And that might be the most terrifying part. This is the story that may have inspired the movie Sinners. Robert Johnson wasn't born a legend. He was born in Mississippi in 1911, a black boy in the Jim Crow South, surrounded by hardship, mystery, and secrets. His mother raised him alone after her husband fled town in disguise to escape a lynching. Robert grew up after hardship, mystery, and secrets. A black boy in the Jim Crow South, surrounded by hardship, mystery, and secrets. His mother raised him alone after her husband fled town in disguise to escape a lynching. Robert grew up with dirt in his nails and songs forming in his...
Damn, so his daddy left to escape a lynch. Wait, boy. Times back then was hard, nigga.
His mother raised him alone after her husband fled town in disguise to escape a lynching. Robert grew up with dirt in his nails and songs forming in his chest. He didn't take to the fields like most. He found music. First on a diddley bow nailed to a shack wall. Later in the back rooms of juke joints, watching the early bluesmen bend sorrow into sound. Then came love. At 17, he married a girl named Virginia, who was 14.
At 17 and 14? What type of games they playing down there?
They were just kids. And she became pregnant and Robert gave up music. He tried to do right and tried to work, but fate didn't care about good intentions. Virginia and their unborn child died during childbirth. By the time Robert arrived...
What the fuck? This shit just get crazy and crazy on God. She died at birth with the child?
And their unborn child died during childbirth. By the time Robert arrived, they were buried. And when her devout family saw him show up carrying a guitar, they didn't just grieve, they cursed him. They called it devil's music and blamed him for the deaths. That moment, the guilt, the grief, all of it would change him forever. After Virginia's death, Robert disappeared. Nobody knows exactly where he went or for how long. But when he returned, he wasn't the same person. He could play, not like before, and not like anyone else. It was as if his fingers knew things they shouldn't, as if every sorrow he'd ever felt had been pulled through his strings. Son House, a blues legend, said it best. Before, Johnson was just a kid bothering the crowd. Now, he sounded like two men playing at once. So the whispers started. The stories and the myths, that he had gone to the crossroads at midnight, that he made a deal, that the devil had taken his soul and left him a sound no one could explain. But there's a more grounded version of that story, though it's no less haunting. Some say Robert met a man named Ike Zimmerman, a skilled guitarist who took him in and taught him how to play. They say their favorite place to practice was a graveyard in Beauregard.
Hey, bro, come on now, dog. Come on, man.
A graveyard? Who the fuck finna practice in a graveyard? Niggas wildin'.
They say their favorite place to practice was a graveyard in Beauregard, Mississippi. But why there? Because it was quiet. because nobody complained, because the dead don't mind the blues. But in 1938, just a year after recording his first songs, Robert Johnson died. He was 27 years old. Some say he was poisoned by a jealous husband. Others point to syphilis. Some still say the devil came calling. Whatever the cause, the world lost him before it ever really had him. He left behind just 29 recorded songs. That's it. But those songs would ripple across generations, reshaping music forever. He was more than a legend. His lyrics were filled with omens, hellhounds, hoodoo magic, powder on the feet, whispers of damnation. He sang about things.
This the nigga who probably created drill music, nigga. This probably that nigga, gang.
Things most men were too scared to name out loud. But underneath the ghost stories, in the guitar licks, was a man who loved, who lost, who tried to find meaning in a world that rarely offered any. A man who turned pain into poetry and sorrow into something beautiful and terrifying. But Sinners isn't Robert Johnson's story, but it walks the path he helped carve, and it's pretty similar story and terrifying. But Sinners isn't Robert Johnson's story, but it walks the path he helped carve, and it's pretty similar. The film's darkness is themes of temptation, guilt, and trading pieces of their soul to feel something again. All of it echoes.
That's where the Illuminati come from, selling your soul and shit, gang. Shit crazy out here, blood. Come on now, bloody.
Johnson's life. A man who may have wanted greatness, but never expected the ghost that would come with it. He didn't ask to be a myth, but myths don't ask for permission. A few people also said, like Keith Richards, he said there's just something supernatural about Robert. And Eric Clapton also said, I had found a master. But maybe the most human thing about him was the hurt. And that hurt still plays every time you hear the blues. Is Robert Johnson part of the famed and unfortunate 27 Club, where influential entertainers passed away at 27 years old like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Kurt Cobain? It is said that every one of those people had more in common than dying at 27 years old. It was their dealings with the devil that connected them. Is Robert Johnson the inspiration behind the character Sammy from Sinners? Or is it pure coincidence? You be the judge. Let me know in the comments. This is the story that may have inspired the movie Sinners, but specifically the character Sammy.
Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Pharaoh's army got tired. Oh, Mary, don't weep. God made
So this old boy Robert.
man and he made him out of clay. Put him on earth, but not to stay. Pharaoh's army got founded. Oh, Mary, don't weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't weep.
That shit was ass, I'm not gonna lie to you. They was tripping back in the Not gonna lie. These niggas know how to sell a movie. Cause this nigga ass, okay? I don't know know about all that good shit that was taking souls and all that shit. That every time somebody do some shit, they always say the devil took a nigga's soul. No, that nigga gave his shit up for some temporary pleasure, nigga. Cause on God Hussein, nigga, you was supposed to be like, sell my soul for, bitch, I been wrong. How you think your pussy ass come up here trying to get me? I ain't no ordinary nigga. You could have went got any other nigga. Nigga, you came to me because you know I got that crack. Nigga, you trying to get you a hit. Fuck you talk. That's how he should have responded to that nigga. You know what I'm saying? You meet me at the crossroads and shit like that. Oh, that got me coming out here. Nigga, you know I've been retarded. That's why y'all coming to me. That's why you trying to come get me. You trying to see what this shit about. Can you contaminate this shit or not? Oh, this really dope. Am I really straight drop 8-1 Yola? That's what you over here for, nigga. What you talking about? You ain't just gonna get no anybody, nigga. You know. Lil Robert on the guitar, I get busy with that bitch. You trying to get you a hit, nigga. Yeah, Robert Johnson needs to put that bitch down. That shit was ass. Yeah, that shit was ass as fuck. Not gonna lie to you. But appreciate y'all for watching. Let's watch this one. Now that nigga on this motherfucker right here, if this him.
His name is synonymous with blues. His music made him one of the most iconic figures in his genre. He is cemented as a legend. And yet, very little is known about Robert Johnson. 29 songs, 2 verified photographs, and hundreds of unanswered questions. Johnson's life, his story, and his artistry is wrapped in mystery to this day, but his music resonates with millions. However, Johnson wasn't always a brilliant musician. In fact, he was considered to be relatively untalented, even up until his early 20s. Allegedly, he improved rapidly on the guitar. So much so that a legend was born that Johnson sold his soul to the devil so that he could become a master of the guitar. Johnson passed away under mysterious circumstances at 27 years old, giving birth to the infamous 27 Club and adding yet another question mark onto his already confusing story. Robert was born on the 8th of May, 1911, to parents Julia Dodds and Noah Johnson in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. His mother had already given birth to 10 kids with her husband Charles, but Robert was born.
It was fucking 10 kids? Damn, I ain't gonna lie. It would be nice to have 10, but a nigga ain't trying.
Born out of wedlock, illegitimately, and had a father who he most likely never met or spoke to. His stepfather, Charles, was a reasonably successful landowner, but after getting into a dispute with a lynch mob, he was forced to move to Memphis, and Robert would eventually be sent there to live with him until he was around 8 or 9 years old. At that age, he moved back to Mississippi to live with his mother and her new husband, Dusty Willis. In his teenage years,
your mama popping that pussy. She keep her, nigga. Beginning of the story, we done went through 3 niggas already. The nigga daddy, the nigga stepdaddy, and now her new husband. God damn, moms, you popping that cooch over there. Calm down.
Robert began to gain an interest in music and dabbled in some different
Who is this nigga? This nigga is in today's age.
Aspects of it. He learned the basics of the guitar from one of his brothers, and he was cited as being a talented harmonica player. We can also assume that he was writing songs and singing during this time. But all of this wasn't very appealing to his new stepfather, who wanted him to work on the plantation fields. This would lead to a conflict between the two, and while he was still a teenager, Robert would try and find his own freedom and independence. This started when he was 19. He married a 16-year-old Virginia Travis on the 17th of February.
In the other story, they say he married a girl, he was 17, the girl was 14. Somebody lying around this bitch now. See, that's why I'm glad I watched this shit. Now I was just finna click off this shit in the video, but I'm glad I watched this.
1929, but unfortunately, she would die.
1930, God damn, nigga, I don't think my grandparents was thought of.
a year later while giving birth. Robert was now a 20-year-old widow with a stepfather he didn't
She was 16, he was 20. See, hey, y'all gotta watch these people telling y'all these stories.
like, a father he never met, and a wife who had just passed away. And lest we forget, he was an African-American man living in the South in the early 20th century. Basically, Robert had an intense childhood, and his adult life wasn't looking very good either. At this stage, all Robert really had was his music. It was around this time that legendary blues icon Son House moved to a town that was near where Robert lived. All of a sudden, a lost and impressionable Robert Johnson was listening to one of the greatest blues artists of his generation perform live every week at the local juke joint. At this point, Robert had some musical ability, but it was mainly at the previously mentioned harmonica, so he wasn't considered talented enough to perform at these establishments. But during the breaks, Johnson would ask if he could play their guitars. In one of the most famous interviews ever given about Robert Johnson, Son House states that he was terrible and that he was often asked to stop playing.
Damn! The trash ass out here.
Follow me and Willie around on Saturday night, Willie Brown. And every time we stop for rest and sit there, little guitar over in the corner or something and go out to catch air, get the guitar and be trying to play it and be just noising the people, And the folks would come out and say, why don't some of y'all go in there and make that boy put get that thing down, he running us crazy.
Johnson may have been in the correct environment to observe the music he wanted to play, but because of his lack of resources and the ridicule he was subjected to when he attempted to perform, he was in the wrong environment to learn. This may have been the reason he left. He did remarry in 1931, but that didn't stop him from traveling around the South for about a year. This is a confusing space of time that is responsible for many of the myths revolving around Johnson. Some people speculated that he left to try and find his biological father, while others believed that he was exclusively focusing on improving his craft. But the other theory, and strangely the most popular one, is that Robert Johnson made a deal with the devil. The story goes that Robert Johnson went to a local crossroads with his guitar before midnight. He started playing his songs, and at midnight, the devil appeared. The devil took the guitar and tuned it, played a song, and gave it back to Johnson. This was the transaction, the turning point for Johnson as a musician. He had given up his soul to the devil himself and was a master of guitar. But with this, his soul was doomed to hell and an untimely demise was in his future. The reason people believe that this is what happened is because of a man named Liddell Johnson, who in 1971 said that this was the way to sell your soul and that his brother Tommy had actually done this. There was no relation between Tommy and Robert, but that didn't stop people from taking this tale and attaching it to Robert's name. At least that's how the story goes. It's obviously a far-fetched tale, but it shows us how impressive and quick Johnson's improvement must have been. The only way the public were able to justify his talents.
One of these white boys out here need to go down there in Mississippi and go to the crossroad, do a video on it.
Was with a story that was this insane, which in itself tells us why Robert Johnson was so good. One thing is almost certain. Between the years of 1930 and 1932, something happened that made Johnson go from being considered embarrassingly bad to one of the greatest guitarists of all time. When he finally returned to play for Son House, nobody was telling him to stop. He was so good, when he finished, all our mouths were standing open. Johnson took his new talents and began traveling with fellow artist Johnny Shines, where he improved his craft even further, but he still hadn't recorded anything and his talents were being wasted. It was the mid-1930s and his second wife had passed away. Johnson was determined to record and make a name for himself. He went into a man named H.C. Spears' store, who worked for the ARC record label. Finally, in November of 1936, Johnson was in a studio recording the first of his almost 30 songs. He would continuously return to record until the summer of 1937. He made okay money doing this and had amassed a small but loyal fan base, but Johnson wasn't a household name by any means. His music had some dark undertones. Songs like Me and the Devil Blues, If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day, Hellhound on My Trail, and of course, Crossroad Blues. Dark themes like hell, the devil, and death were prominent in his music, and this did nothing
I told y'all this nigga was making drill music. This was the nigga who made drill music back in the day.
but add fuel to his already dark image. But this was par for the course for blues. These weren't new thematic explorations, they were cemented attributes of the genre, but people emphasized Johnson's dark lyrics to add to the narrative, even though there were hundreds of similar acts doing the same thing. Regardless, the recordings were done, and unfortunately, that would be Johnson's entire discography, because a year later, he would die.
Damn.
On the 16th of August, 1938, Robert Johnson, aged 27, was found dead. Very little is known about the specifics of his untimely demise. In fact, the actual date he died wasn't discovered for another 30 years when music journalist Gail Dean Wardlow found his death certificate. It didn't have any cause of death, so we weren't given any answers in that department, but of course,
The nigga was 26 years old. He was male, color, race, black singer. He was single. Place of death. County. Mississippi State Board of Health. Full name Robert L. Johnson. Residence. What they say? Greenwood, Mississippi. Date of death 8/16/38. God damn. Oh, it would have been just right now. 8/16/38.
there are theories. The first theory, which is the most plausible and the most boring, is that Robert died from untreated syphilis that he had inherited from one of his parents. It was a common problem for low-income families at the time, and it's entirely possible that Johnson was a victim of this. But if you haven't figured it out yet, nothing is ever black and white with Robert Johnson. And as you probably
How you
expected, there is a
See how niggas just get to assuming shit? How you know nothing ever black and white with this nigga? Nigga, your mama wasn't even thought of around this time.
second theory that Johnson was murdered. Johnson had been performing for a few weeks at a country dance that was only 15 miles away from where he was found. Allegedly, he was flirting with a married woman at these dances. Her husband gave Robert a drink, but Sonny Boy Williamson, a fellow musician and friend of Johnson, slapped the drink out of his hand and told him that it was dangerous to accept drinks from unknown people. Johnson was angry at Williamson for doing this, and he accepted a second drink from the husband, which he did consume. Williamson wrote an account about this, and he was a well-respected figure of the blues community who had a confirmed association with Johnson, so it is entirely possible that he was telling the truth. Whether Johnson was actually poisoned is a different story altogether. However, Robert Mac McCormack, a notable blues researcher, claimed that he tracked down the man who killed Johnson and actually got a confession from him. He declined to reveal the name or release the confession, which seems like a strange thing to do. If you were a blues researcher and found out who killed one of the genre's biggest icons, it's very strange that you wouldn't release that information. But these accounts and statements have made this second theory more believable, and a lot of people do believe it to be true. Either way, the end result was the same. Johnson had passed at the young age of 27, with very few answers as to what
He passed at 26. He passed at 26.
happened, concluding his already insane life with an ending that was incredibly unfortunate and untimely, but morbidly fitting for such a mysterious and interesting character. Some of his friends, associates, and peers wouldn't find out about his death for a long time, not until they looked for him and realized through word of mouth that he was gone. It seemed as if Johnson would fade into obscurity. For 2 decades after his death, he remained a relatively unknown figure in the music world, but in 1961, Columbia Records released the album, King of the Delta Blues Singers, a compilation of Johnson's work that would achieve immense success and bring his music to a wider audience. It was widely considered to be one of the greatest albums of all time, and it solidified Johnson as a blues legend. He was finally recognized, and while he wasn't able to enjoy the fruits of his labor, the world could enjoy his work and admire his greatness. His dream of becoming one of the greatest blues artists of all time was finally realized. Robert Johnson probably didn't sell his soul to the devil, but he did give his soul to blues. It could be argued that what Johnson managed to do in his short life was one of the greatest feats ever achieved by a musician. His short discography changed blues forever and influenced hundreds of notable musicians and continues to do so to this day. He won a Grammy in 1990 for Best Historical Album, his song Crossroad Blues was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame 8 years later, and he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. He has been cited as an influence to artists like Mick Jagger, Fleetwood Mac, Bob Dylan, and Eric Clapton. He did all of this in a very short span of time, with a life that was as difficult as any. He overcame it all and persevered
Sound like Tupac to me.
to become one of music's most important icons. It's very difficult to distinguish fact from fiction when it comes to this man. The historical inaccuracies, conspiracy theories, and sheer lack of any substantial documentation make his story a confusing one, but one thing is for certain: Robert Johnson was a legend.
I guess, man. Appreciate y'all for watching. Catch me in the next.